Hey everyone, it's Sleepy Reader, aka Damien. It is well past midnight my time. I just spent about an hour listening to DrMonkeybot, Adam, Johnny DC DaCosta, and Terrence Comic Crack on the rewind of their live hangout. And it just gave me an urge, despite the late hour, I should be going to bed, gave me the urge to do a little bit of a haul. I thought about doing it live because they were talking about how maybe they're now preferring to do live videos. But I guess I'm still have mixed feelings about doing videos live, and I don't do any editing or anything, but I just feel less distracted when I'm recording myself and then put it up. Although I do enjoy the interaction when I'm doing a live video, I guess I don't always like the end result. Which is silly because I'm not trying to be professional or anything. But so anyway, I have kind of mixed feelings about doing live videos, but I may try some live videos coming up in a bit. Right now, in case you're wondering, I've been reading this volume. It's reprints all of the Neal Adams XMen from, I think, 1969 in a fairly oversized edition. So I've been enjoying it quite a bit, and I'm reading with a purpose because I have asked Matt to have this be our next comic book series that we focus on for our podcast, Never Stay Dead. And I'm very curious what Matt is going to make of this. I mean, I came into comics at a time where Neal Adams was one of those artists you worshipped. But whether that'll make a difference to someone born many years after these comics came out, I don't know. I always thought Neal Adams came in with a super punch with this splash page. The cover of his first issue wasn't that great, but this splash page was like a mission statement of, I'm going to wow you beyond what any other artist is doing on the X-Men. Or on most superhero comics. So that's how I interpreted it. Anyway, that's not a haul. So these are going to be comics and things I picked up over the past couple of months. I have kind of piles of them that I still wanted to do haul videos of, and it postponed. So sales at Cosmic Monkey, sales at my comic book shop, Cloud9, sales at Excalibur Comics, elsewhere. Some things I may have picked up online, not too many of those, but some of them. And then stuff I may have gotten some of this stuff from the Frankenstein comic book swap also. So I can't always remember anymore where this came from. One thing I haven't really taken a look at it yet, is this issue of the Comics Journal. I know with the Kayfabe station, some people I know are looking more at Comics Journal again, and I certainly just thought, wow, Captain Victory, I want to dig back into the Captain Victory thing of Kirby's late career, and even if it's just some Kirby art, like this is a Kirby cover that I've never seen before. At least I don't recall it as being an actual Captain Victory cover. Looks like kind of like a quick sketch. John Byrne and Stan Lee team up on new Silver Surfer tale, a raw interview with Art Spiegelman, all this and Superman. The Comics Journal always felt odd to me when I used to read it, just because their bread and butter was the mainstream comic book world, but they obviously looked down upon it and were more interested, and it probably got more so later on than this, but they were more interested in the, for lack of a better word, the literary comic world, such it is as it is. Let's see what's on the back of this. Like that would be more their cup of tea, I guess. That looks like a picture from Raw magazine. I used to love Raw magazine. I like both, and they were also in my memory, big champions of attacking the big companies for their business practices, which is interesting. Kazar and Moon Knight join Micronauts as Marvel's direct sales only comics titles. So this comes at a time that of piece of comic book history that I'm very interested in. I was there, so to speak, going to my first regular comic book shop in Ithaca, New York, and the direct market was starting to become a force where they would aim comics straight at the direct market, which is what Captain Victory was. I don't think you could get Captain Victory on regular newsstands, but that was not, of course, from one of the big comic book companies. Harlan Ellison versus Mr. X. Does this have to do with his lawsuit against somebody? Or is this the comic strip Mr. X? I think it has to do with the lawsuit. Mr. X is probably Michael Fleischer? I'm not sure. Oh, there's some a Hembeck Daredevil. Yeah, so I've got so much to read, but this is something that I wanted to dig into. I'm not immediately coming across the Jack Kirby piece. Hopefully it's a pretty long one. Pardon me. I should have pre-looked through this. As I flip through, I'm not finding the Jack Kirby piece at all. All kinds of stuff. But no Jack Kirby. Strange. I can see on the cover. Jack Kirby returns with Captain Victory. That's all it says. Maybe it's not even really a feature article. But still, I'm glad to get it. And I want to collect more comics journals, actually. Now that they're becoming part of history. Okay, here's another thing that I forgot I got because I was buying so many in the past few months before life froze up. And I don't know where I found this. It says Metal Hurlant. Is this the French original comic or is this something else? I don't know. Poor adults. I don't know how they pronounce adults in French. Adults? Number 11. 8 francs 50. And in Canada, wait, can that be right? In Canada, $25? No, that can't be right. Must be misreading. $2.50 maybe. Bad light in here right now. Ooh, feels sturdy paper. Oh, what have we got here? Some Mobius? Or is that Drulier? No, not Drulier. Is it? Yeah, I think it's Mobius. Huh. And it is in French. This is the real Metal Hurlant. It's my first real Metal Hurlant. If I spend like an hour, I could read a few paragraphs of French. So, is there a copyright date? 1976. So it wasn't too long after Metal Hurlant started coming out that it, just a few years it got translated into English, or bits and pieces of it, by National Lampoon when they brought out Heavy Metal. This art looks really familiar, but I don't know. I don't know this artist. Wow. Now I'm already craving more Metal Hurlant. And several times recently I've encountered people talk, like in the introduction to Ronin, written by Jeanette Kahn, and then I guess in a recent interview with Steve Bissette, talking about how everyone was excited by Metal Hurlant when they saw it in French, and then when they saw Heavy Metal, they realized these things weren't very well written. So that seems to be a general consensus of the pros at the time. As a fan, that never occurred to me that they weren't well written. I would have to revisit that or rethink that. They were something completely different than your regular narrative serial comics. That looks like more Mobius. And maybe the art, it was art over plot, maybe, but the subject matter, I think. It almost looked like something. Plutonus. Is that who drew it? I'm not sure. It looks a little bit like but it's not. It says scenario, picaret, lettrage, delobel, and design tardy. Is that Tardy drawing? Jacques Tardy? I don't know. I'm so ignorant. Wow. So, very happy to have grabbed that. I presume, but I don't remember, there's a $15 sticker on it. I presume that I spent $7 on it then, $7.50. Don't know if that's a good price or not. Then, completely other end of the spectrum, I was very happy to snag some of these Legion of Superhero digests, which apparently includes 16 pages of new story. Oh, new costumes. I think somewhere in here might be one of those. Ah, yes. So that's the new part, is where they show everybody's new costumes. Maybe those actually did appear in a regular comic. I don't know why I get so excited about these digests. I only found a few digests when I was a kid, and I would have loved more. It seemed extra exciting to me. I think basically because you got more comic than in a 20-page comic book. And I don't know why. It just seemed exciting to me as a kid, and so it still seems exciting to me as an adult. So when I can find these things affordably, and it seems, I don't know, particularly to fit that childhood thrill of comics when it's the Legion of Superheroes, which just, like just there when we were looking through all these costume designs, it just is kind of the pure thrill of superheroes. Lots of gaudy costumes, lots of powers, lots of just sort of crazy far future stuff. That looked like Jack Abel inking to me. I couldn't tell who the artist was right away. So this first piece, the art is by Carmine Infantino and, oh man, my old eyes in the bad light. I can't even quite read that, who the inker was. But it's Paul Levitz. And then this masthead, I noticed this before, is interesting. So Jeanette Kahn at this time, which was 1982, was president and publisher. Joe Orlando was vice president and editorial director. I never knew Joe Orlando, who dates back to the EC days, and then was the editor of like House of Mystery and House of Secrets. He became vice president and editorial director. Dick Giordano is managing editor. Mike W. Barr is editor. So I don't know if that means he's the editor of this digest series, or if Mike W. Barr was the editor when the Legion originally came out, of these particular Legion issues. I don't know. And then very interesting to me, the editorial coordinator was Karen Berger, who must have in 1982 just been on the verge of her initial successes as an editor, starting to change comics along with Alan Moore, and then later bringing in other people, other Brits basically. She was the lady who brought in the Brits, and then created Vertigo. School for Supervillains. Yes. Yeah, that's Jack. I'm sure that's Jack Abel inking there. But I could be totally wrong. I feel sure. Bob Rozakis was the production manager. Paul Levitz was manager of business affairs, whatever that meant. And Arthur Gutowitz was the treasurer. So all those names except the treasurer on this masthead are names that are familiar to me, which is interesting, somehow interesting to me. So there's this one, and then another one, which I will pull out also and look through. Let's see, what was the number on the first one? It was number 24. Is it number 24 of the Best of DC or number 24 of the Legion of Superheroes? I'm not sure. And this one is number 8, so it presumably came first. DC Special. So this one says Best of DC Special, And this one says DC Special. I don't know if that means they were part of different series or not. Let's see what the copyright date on this one was. Copyright date on this one is 1981. So that would imply with, number 8 and then number 24 that they were in fact 2 years apart. That makes sense. So maybe they just slightly changed the title. And yeah, in DC it's called DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest. Number 8, 1982, Volume 2. And there is the editorial coordinator now is Paul Levitz, not Karen Berger. And Saul Harris is the president. Jeanette Kahn is the publisher. I wonder what's the difference between the president and a publisher in the publishing company. Joe Orlando is still the editorial director. This one nicely tells you where they originally were published on the table of contents. Not the date, though, but still that helps. On the back, that's very exciting. All this stuff, all these heads. I love the heads with the names or whatever. And then, who are the Legion's greatest foes? Witness the escape of the Fatal Five, page 3. Who is more powerful, Superboy or Validus? Read Fight for the Championship of the Universe, page 25. Who is behind the most dangerous organization in the galaxy? Learn in No Escape from the Circle of Death, page 49. Who will be the hero when Colossal Boy and Shrinking Violet become lost 1 million miles from home, page 73. Plus, a chilling sequel in this issue, The Fatal Five Who Twisted Time, numbers, page 79. Extra, cover gallery by Neal Adams. Oh, page 99. Gotta look at that. That's some cover gallery. It's just one page with some black and white reproductions of 3 different Neal Adams covers. Still, Neal Adams could still sell books in 1982. A little bit of Neal Adams, throw that in. First story up is story by Jim Shooter, art by Kurt Swan and George Klein. George Klein doing the inking. Still blows me away that Jim Shooter at age 13 was writing these stories. So there's that. I guess I picked this up at Cloud9 at my comic book store. This was probably just, usually on, it might have been a sale or it might have been just on New Comic Book Day. I usually pick up a couple of back issues if I search through Cloud9's, little box of latest back issue acquisitions and see if there's anything in there I want and can afford. The Final Defeat of the Human Race. I believe that's a John Romita cover. This would have been an annual. Let's see what's inside. If it's the longest Submariner FF super epic ever published. I have a feeling it's going to be a reprint. Yes, that looks very much like a reprint of something from maybe 5 or 6 years before this was published. And you used to be able to find the copyright somewhere in the indicia of the older material. This was published in 1970, so Jack Kirby had just recently left for DC. I'm not seeing... copyright 1963. Wow, that's pretty good art. Pretty good Jack Kirby art for 1963. So after Jack Kirby left for DC, they in particular made a point of publishing tons of reprints of Jack Kirby material and getting those out on the market, so that there was lots of Jack Kirby for Marvel fans, even though he was gone. You got all your pinups here. Anyway, that's fun. Has a nice old comic book smell. And then speaking of Jack Kirby, I don't know where I got this, but I'm not very aggressively, but I'm a little bit trying to get, if I can, without spending a lot of money, and I'm sure I did not pay that $6, but I don't know what I paid. All the covers that Jack Kirby did at Marvel in the mid to late 70s when he came back to Marvel. He did a lot of covers then. And they were in a different. They were very good, but they were in a different style than back in his earlier Marvel days. And it used to catch me up a little bit because I kept hoping that there would be Jack. It always disappointed me that there wasn't Jack Kirby art on the inside. But now I know none of it's going to have Jack Kirby art on the inside, and I'm just collecting them for the covers in a sense, although I might read them. Excuse the sound of the tape. Marvel Chillers. I said Marvel Chiggers. But certainly that cover makes it look like something you want to read. With Red Wolf and the Super Skrull, and I don't even know who this guy in green is. Plus, George Tuska art, Jim Shooter writing. I assume before Jim Shooter was the editor. Yeah, Archie Goodwin's the editor. I am not a George Tuska fan. I think he did great work back in the day at some point, but by the time he was a regular at Marvel, to me, he did not capture it. But I read somewhere just recently, I know, it was in that Jazzy John Romita book I was reading, where Jazzy John said whenever George Tuska came in and drew an issue, the sales would go up. So that's interesting. This art looks not bad, but not great either. Not knock your socks off. But I might actually read this. I'm kind of curious. It looks pretty fun. So, I'm going slow. There'll be more videos because there's lots of stuff and I'm not just banging it out there. Another thing that I just kind of grab when I find it in a 50-cent box is these Elrics from First Comics and other Michael Moorcock adaptations from First Comics and maybe some other of the indie publishers in the 80s. This is from 1985 and it has art by Michael T. Gilbert, which is pretty amazing stuff, and that coloring is pretty amazing for 1985. George Freeman did both the inks and the colors. George Freeman, I believe, the artist that I first met doing Captain Canuck, and he seemed to later on just settle into ink as an inker, but he was a very good artist in his own right. Anyway, the combination of those two artists on these Elrics is really beautiful. And I assume they were adopted by Roy Thomas. Yeah, Roy Thomas. He was kind of your go-to guy for adapting Sword and Sorcery. Wow. I'm pretty excited by this now that I'm looking at the insides. And also from the 50-cent bins, depending on my mood, I've just picking up random things I never heard of. The Champions from Hero Comics. To Battle the Gods. I know I've cracked this open and looked before, but I've forgotten what it looks like inside. It has the look of a pretty decent 80s comic. Like that could be a Marvel opening, with you could picture Hercules there and Thor brooding in the background or something as the gods play. Yeah. So Hero Comics was putting out decent comics. I don't know how it reads. What's the credits here? A story by Dennis Maloney, pencils by Chris Marinin, and inks by Del Barris. People I've never heard of. Janice Cohen was the colorist. I have heard of her. I think she did a lot at Marvel. So maybe I will read this sometime and report back to you on what the heck the Champions from Hero Comics. Anyone ever heard of Hero Comics before? Well, the cover's by the interior artist. That's a good cover, too. And then this one from AC Comics. I used to know what AC Comics meant. They published a lot of this guy whose last name was Black, and it looks like he did the inks on this cover. Guler and Black did the cover. Let's see. Dan St. John was the writer, Greg Guler the artist, Kevin Dusbin the inker on the insides. Bill Black was the publisher editor of these American AC Comics. I think American Comics is what it stood for. And my memory's very faint, but I feel like they were people who, were trying to be their own slightly amateur, although it's not very amateur looking, version of Marvel Comics. who somehow managed to get some money to publish and get into the direct market comic book stores. This is from 1984. It's published in Longwood, Florida. And so I think in 1984, charging $1.50 for a comic, that was probably pretty high. So you had to be sort of deep into comics and wanting to get everything to get something like this, or just wanting more superheroes. I definitely bought some AC comics in the early 80s. I don't have many memories about what they're about. Oh, here's the back cover. I like that. Crime does not pay. Scarlet Scorpion will make sure of it. Go Scarlet Scorpion. Hey, Jerry Ordway is the inker on there. That looks very much like Captain Marvel to me. Marvels. And another one from Comico, the Justice Machine, and I'm sure I got this in a dollar bin also, or 50-cent bin. I have been grabbing Justice Machine, and this is number 1, but I think there's several volumes of Justice Machine, so I don't know if this is the actual beginning of Justice Machine or not. And my understanding is Comico, when it collapsed, all of the work that was done there got caught up in some huge legal battle, and so I think very little or none of it has been reprinted. Like there's a whole bunch of Bill Willingham Elementals, I think was Comico. Off the top of my head, I would have thought Justice Machine was American Comics, because in my memory, they're kind of a attempt to do the X-Men or something like that, the X-Men and the Avengers combined. Tony Isabella was the scripter, but I know he was not the creator. The creator was Mike Gustovich. Oh, here we have a bit of an explanation. So I think this is not their original origin. True confessions time. When Mike Gustovich asked me to write Justice Machine, I accepted more because I wanted to work on something with Mike than out of any special love for the characters. In fact, I didn't even remember that much about Challenger and crew from their previous appearances. But I dutifully did my research, getting more and more into the team as I did so. This seems a bit too honest. And began to form some very definite ideas about who these people were and why they were who they were. Diana Schultz and I thought it might be fun, though, to share some of my initial impressions of our cast with you. So, I think maybe this started as a very semi-professional kind of thing, and as it got more professional, they might have hired Tony Isabella to come in and script it for Mike Gustovich, who was the creator. And it says Mike Gustovich and Tony Isabella, artist, plotter, writer. They come from another universe that's a dystopia, but don't realize that they're one of the champions from the dystopia. And they don't realize their society is evil, but eventually realize it is and turn against their evil masters, fighting them both on our Earth and in their own universe. I believe that's my brief rundown from the few issues of the Justice Machine I've read. But it looks very much like someone who wants to do a Marvel comic, I think. I don't know. I could be wrong. Also in the realm of the 80s independent comics, Pacific Comics, I think they were the publishers of Jack Kirby's Captain Victory also, is Star Slayer #2. I bought this at a charity auction on YouTube. I think this one was from, I don't know who originally owned it, whether it was Edwin or not, but it was Edwin's charity auction. I think this one was for the, what's it called? The thing for the comic book artists who need medical help and such. Or it might have been, there was another charity going around for a girl named Moira, but I don't think that was this one. Anyway, this one, so I paid more for this than I normally pay for a back issue, and certainly for Star Slayer, who's usually 50-cent fodder, but this issue 2 is the first appearance of, the Rocketeer, and there he is on the back cover. Dave Stevens' Rocketeer, which for some reason Dave Stevens' Rocketeer has become of particular interest to collectors more than some other backup characters. I mean, the Rocketeer was very good and was a somewhat popular independent comic for a while, and then they did make a movie of it. But you don't hear much about the Rocketeer anymore, but I think it still remains a sought-after comic to some degree. And I can't remember what I paid for it, but I just thought it was a perfectly fine price, particularly that it was going to charity, and this comic book was donated to charity. I know I had this comic originally, and I remember liking the Rocketeer, and later buying more comics with the Rocketeer in it. I love Dave Stevens' style and everything, but I was mostly a fan of Mike Grell. And Mike Grell did a number of indie comics. He made quite the stab at doing indie comics, and then ended up back at DC. Because I think because the indie comics all folded, had trouble paying their writers or their creators. I don't know though. I would think there should be collections out there of Star Slayer. But part of the problem also is after a while Mike Grell stopped drawing it. I'm not sure what the story is there. Maybe he was already going back to DC, but continuing this going with cheaper artists. So that's fun. I think I have Star Slayer #1 lying around somewhere, which didn't cost me any money. And maybe I'll, at some point, find a chance to read through some Star Slayers and see if I still like it. I remember even back then, I was a fan of Mike Grell, but I remember being kind of embarrassed by Star Slayer's scanty outfit. Although it doesn't seem so bad here. He's got the more typical Conan type of thing. But I think at other times he was wearing kind of some weird leotard that with lots of holes in it. I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering. Mike Grell definitely liked to draw his men in their loincloths were very slender too. Let's see. Here's one I just bought for the cover because I love MODOK and I thought this was a cool cover. Because mostly I'm pretty happy just reading Ms. Marvel on Marvel Unlimited, but it seemed fun to get this. And inside is Jim Mooney and Joe Signett art, Chris Claremont script, and that's a good thing. I really liked Jim Mooney as a penciler and an inker. And Jim Mooney inked by Joe Sinnott seems quite interesting to me. And it's MODOK. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. Let's see. Just a few more things. Here's Little Dot, which I paid 25% off this because that's my usual store discount. And I thought that this was high priced. And I thought there was probably a bit of a scam to say scarce last issue. But I don't know. I might be wrong. I just felt like getting a Little Dot when I saw it there, and I picked it up. It feels kind of thin. I hope it's not one of those ones that's got the ads removed. That would suck, and then I would be pissed for having spent $9 on it. Normally I get Little Dot for, I don't know, $2 or $3 or less. Whoa, that's weird. Starts with an ad, although some Harvey Comics did do that. And they love to give kids these calendars, these Harvey Comics calendars. This is from 1976. It is, for a Little Dot comic, it is in very good shape. I just heard an interview with the grandson of one of the Harvey brothers, who's trying to make a documentary about Harvey Comics, which has a very interesting history. Amongst other things, they produced a lot of horror comics that were competing with EC Comics back in the day, in the late 40s, 50s. But he said that one point in the 70s, there were 32 different Richie Rich titles. So that character took off from them. At one point, they were one of the major players in comics. And when they were going under, Marvel tried to buy the rights to keep publishing them, because Marvel felt that these kind of Harvey comics were the entry point to comics. You needed to read things like Little Dot and Casper the Ghost and Richie Rich before you were ready to move on to Marvel superheroes. And I think it was Tom DeFalco who was in charge at the time. He was very interested in keeping that going. They didn't see Harvey as competitors. They saw Harvey as the people who fed the industry with new readers. Let's see, there was one other thing in here. Where'd that go? Oh, shoot. I guess I don't have it here. Oh, here it is. So also a little note from, this will be the last one I show. I was just interested in this because it looked like a cool Legion of Superheroes comic. But there's a little sticker on it. First Major Matt Mason. You got to be my age probably to remember Major Matt Mason. But during the time when we were doing the moon launch, Apollo whatever, 12 or whatever it was, there was a huge toy for all the little boys I knew. I was 7 at the time. Was Major Matt Mason. He was a astronaut doll, and you could buy all kinds of accessories for him, like a moonwalker and a rocket ship and stuff. And I would take my Major Matt Masons over to my friend's house, and he had Major Matt Masons and more gear to go with it, like the moonwalker, and we would play with Major Matt Mason, while his older brother was playing with G.I. Joe and making G.I. Joe and Barbie get naked. But anyway, there was a guy, a month or two before I bought this, there was a guy who came into my comic book shop, Cloud9, and he was searching for the first appearance of Major Matt Mason because he'd heard they were going to make a movie of it. And apparently he was a guy who makes his living off of trying to figure out way in advance the things that are going to become hot. But I guess he didn't find it, and later my comic book shop guy found it and put it on sale for $12, and I bought it for $9 with my discount. I don't at all think, I don't know if I haven't heard anything more about a Major Matt Mason movie. And I don't know if that would drive up this comic book, which basically has a little advertisement in it for Major Matt Mason never had a comic book, but he did have a one-page comic strip ad, and then another ad over here on the side. So would this make this, if a movie came out, some incredibly valuable issue? Oh yeah, there's Major Matt Mason was ahead of the regular astronauts. He had a sled there. I don't remember that thing with the 3 on it. Wow. And there's the Moonwalker. It looks different than I remember also. When I first, well, I don't know when it was, but at some point, maybe 5-10 years ago, I looked on eBay to see if I could get a Major Matt Mason doll, and the price was over $100 at that time. So I imagine if there's a movie, the dolls would go up even higher in value. The generation, I'm 58, so the generation that would remember and be nostalgic about that's pretty old, but not too old, certainly, to want to collect toys. So, and who was I should look at the regular story in here. The Legion Chain Gang. Move faster, Superboy. This is a jewel mine, not a rest home for Legionnaires. How are they able... Well, maybe there's a little green glow on his anklet there, so I guess that's how they're able to do that. Keep him in check. Nice classic art. Maybe is that Kurt Swan? Let me see if they give credits at the front. They probably don't. No, they do not. I would think that's Kurt Swan. Tales of the Legion. Part 2, The Legion Spies. It's strange that even though there's a really bad Legion of Superhero comics out right now, my interest in Legion of Superheroes is sort of making a big comeback. I never even tried the Legion of Superheroes during the New 52. My computer just went to sleep. Again. Okay, so I'll be back with another haul, maybe some comic book thoughts about things I've been reading, and of course, not too far in the future, a Never Stay Dead episode where we talk about those Neal Adams X-Men. So I hope you're all having a good night. It's so far past my bedtime.